everybody, this is Carol, the dietitian, and this month we're going to be talking about holiday spices. So fall and winter are the times of the year when the spices tend to play a really predominant role in our holiday cooking. The traditional holiday dishes call for what are known as the warmer spices, such as cinnamon, nutmeg, cloves, pepper, allspice. We're going to be talking about some of these spices and some of the health benefits of the spices, but more about the flavor and the history of the spices. Now, the top selling spice in the world is pepper. It's called the king of spices. And the definition of a spice is any dried part of a plant other than the leaves. So spices all come from plants. They're not the leaves, but it could be any other dried part of the plant. They're used for seasoning and flavoring, but they're not the main ingredient in a dish. Leaves are considered herbs, and leaves that you would use in cooking can be either fresh or dried. So you could think of thyme or sage, basil, oregano. Those are all herbs. They all come from plants, and they're all the leaf of a plant. But with your spices, like say here, cinnamon stick. Cinnamon stick is actually the bark of the cinnamon tree. Cardamom, which is another spice back here, this is actually a seed pod, and we'll talk about all these more in detail. Allspice, which is down here, is actually a dried berry. Cloves, right here, these are dried flower buds. And ginger, which is right here, ginger is actually a root. And this can be, you can serve ginger actually fresh as well as dried or crystallized. We'll talk about all these. So spices can be bark, roots, twigs, berries, seeds, but they all come from plants. Now salt, many people consider salt a spice. Salt is actually a mineral. It goes very well with all your spices, but salt is considered a mineral and not a spice. India is the largest producer, consumer, and exporter of spices in the entire world, but all countries grow, produce, and use spices. But India is the biggest producer, consumer, and exporter of spices. They've been used throughout history in cuisine. Obviously, we cook with spices, preservation, and with that, I found out that ancient Egyptians used to use cinnamon to help embalm bodies and make them smell better during the mummification process. So I would assume you'd need a lot of it. There's a growing field of research regarding spices and our health and prevention of diseases or chronic conditions. Many spices possess antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, and anti-carcinogenic properties. Other spices are shown to be promising and help lowering blood cholesterol or lowering blood glucose. The benefits of using spices in your diet, they appear to occur over time with consistent use of the spices as well as a well-balanced diet as opposed to supplementation or pills. So spices aren't something like you could take a nutmeg every day and your blood sugar is going to get lower, or you'd eat a whole thing of ginger in one day and you'd have some type of miraculous benefit. Spices are more the type of things that you include in your diet, and over time they feel like there's a benefit to it. It's not very well studied yet, and there are no strong recommendations or research to support you going out and buying spices just to ingest over the counter. More so what we would like you to do is just maybe include spices in your diet. So we're just going to go over a couple different spices that I thought that were interesting and that you typically use this time of year. So cinnamon. Here you can see cinnamon. It comes in cinnamon sticks, or we've probably all used ground cinnamon. It's probably one of the most common spices out there. It comes from the bark of a cinnamon tree. It's used in cuisines throughout the world. It has been studied for its antioxidant power, its anti-inflammatory, but mostly the most promising studies is that it seems to help lower blood sugar levels in people who do have diabetes or hyperglycemia, but that's in conjunction with following a diabetic diet and taking any type of diabetic medications. Cinnamon, if you have elevated blood sugars and you took a cinnamon pill every day, that alone is not going to help lower your blood sugars unless you're also following a consistent diet and medications if your doctor has you on medications. Nice thing about cinnamon is it adds sweetness to your foods without adding sugar. So it's a nice addition to things like hot cereal in the morning or fruit or yogurt. It's part of the famous pumpkin pie spice that you see everywhere this time of year. Pumpkin pie spice, it's one of the 4 spices included in pumpkin pie spice, and it kind of helps you from having to measure out a 1/4 teaspoon of this and 1/8 teaspoon of that. 4 spices are combined together in this pumpkin pie spice, with cinnamon being the predominant spice in that. In Mexico, they often add cinnamon to their hot chocolate, along with a little bit of vanilla and a dash of pepper, and they make a special Mexican hot cocoa. You also add cinnamon to things like eggnog, stews, chilies, all kinds of things. So the uses of cinnamon is endless. So allspice is a dried berry. It comes from a tree that's grown in Mexico and Central America. It resembles a peppercorn in some ways, but it's very smooth and it's much bigger than a typical peppercorn. It's a very important ingredient in cuisine in the Caribbean. It's used in the jerk seasoning, and it's also used in Swedish meatballs. So allspice. In the United States, we mostly use it in our desserts, but it's used in a form of chili that they make in Cincinnati. It's called Cincinnati style chili, which has quite a bit of allspice in it. You can pickle it, use it in pickled vegetables or fish, and mincemeat pie, pumpkin desserts, mulled wine, and spiced apple cider. It is the second ingredient in this pumpkin pie spice that I talked about earlier. So you have cinnamon and allspice are both part of the pumpkin pie spice. The next one I wanted to show you was anise. And that's right up there. And that is made from a flowering plant, and it has a strong licorice-like flavor. The anise that I actually brought for you to see is called star anise, and I thought it was just a pretty little spice to show you. And it's used to flavor food, drinks, like a liqueur, like Sambuca is a licorice flavored liqueur, as well as candies like black jelly beans. So black jelly beans get a lot of their taste from this type of spice because of the licorice. My mother-in-law actually uses this spice when she makes her Italian pizzelle cookies. They have just a hint of licorice. This star anise is a little bit stronger than the plain anise that you can buy in the grocery store. Cardamom, which I had out there earlier, these are seed pods that come from different plants in the ginger family. They can be black or green, but green is the most commonly used. Their taste is described as minty, citrusy, spicy. It's kind of a unique taste. It's used a lot in Scandinavian cooking, like in Norway, Sweden, as well as in the Middle East and Arabic countries. I don't use cardamom that much when I cook. Typically around the holidays, it pairs really well with like your cinnamon and nutmeg and clove, but on its own, it just has a very unique, different type of taste. Cloves, that's right here. Cloves are the flowering buds of a clove tree. They're native to Indonesia, but they grow in many countries, and cloves have a very strong, biting flavor. So you use those very sparingly in recipes. You can flavor meats with it. I remember my mom, years ago, she used to cross the top of a ham and then stick all these little pieces of clove in the ham. And then I also remember as a girl in school taking oranges and studying the oranges with cloves, and you would hang it up kind of as a sachet. So, but you can also flavor meats, curries and marinades, fruits such as apples and pears, but again, cloves is something you'd want to use sparingly, and you typically see it used as ground clove, okay? In some countries, they actually smoke cloves. They actually have clove cigarettes. Ginger. Ginger's your next one. This is a root from a flowering plant. You can use it fresh. You can see it pickled. So for anybody who eats sushi, they usually have pickled ginger over on the side, powdered or crystallized. Some of the benefits of ginger, is to help with nausea, motion sickness, and indigestion. It's very common in Asian and Indian cuisines, and it's used in meats, seafoods, vegetable dishes and a lot in sushi, but also in baked goods. So gingerbread gets its name from the ginger that's used in it. It's also used in beverages, so ginger ale, ginger beer, ginger tea. And this is the third ingredient in the pumpkin pie spice. So far you have cinnamon, allspice, and ginger, okay? The next one we wanted to talk about was nutmeg. And here is a sample of a nutmeg, and here's one cracked open. Nutmeg is a seed that grows on a tropical evergreen tree. It has a very pungent fragrance that's kind of sweet, and it was used as incense by the Romans. There's another spice that comes from the same tree, and that's called mace. And mace is the seed covering that is outside this nutmeg. So this is a nutmeg. You could either grate this and you would smell the nutmeg, or you could buy it already ground. But when it's first harvested, there's a covering over the seed, and when they crack that covering off and ground it, that is a spice called mace. Nutmeg is made from grinding up this seed into the powder, and you obviously use it in a lot of your baked goods, fruit desserts, honey cakes, eggnog, things like that. And it is the fourth ingredient in this pumpkin pie spice, nutmeg. Peppercorns, which I have right here. Peppercorns are actually the fruit berries of a vine. They're the world's most traded spice, and they've been around since the beginning of time. They can be black, green, I don't have any green ones in here, but white or pink, and the green ones are often pickled, and that's what are turned into capers. Pickled peppercorns, pickled green peppercorns are what we know as capers. You often add pepper to your gingerbread along with the ginger to give gingerbread its very unique taste. Last one I wanted to talk to you about was vanilla. Now, in my shopping, I could not find a fresh vanilla bean pod, which is what I wanted to bring you, because vanilla, it comes from the pods of a tropical orchid. Mexico's famous for its vanilla, followed by Madagascar. But vanilla is the second most expensive spice that's sold in the world because the growing of the seed pods is very labor intensive. But a vanilla seed pod is just a long, dark, thin, rubbery looking little pod. You can find it sometimes in the grocery store. They usually sell one or two at a time in a little tube. But we often use just the vanilla extract, okay? The vanilla extract comes from steeping the vanilla beans in alcohol and then liquefying it like that. But you can take a whole vanilla bean pod and you can slice it lengthwise and scrape out the seeds and the pulp and use it to like flavor custards or teas. You can add it to oatmeal or other hot cereals. And again, it's part of that Mexican hot cocoa that I talked about earlier. Storing spices, just real quick, the best way to store your spices in a cool, dry area away from heat and light. So storing your spices on top of the stove is not a great idea. Store them in a cabinet where they can stay cool and in the dark. Whole spices are the best if you can get those and grind them yourself, but obviously you can get spices all ground up. Every single flavor that's out there also comes ground, so you don't have to go through all of that. Buy your spices in as small of amounts as possible. I used to buy big containers of spice, and now I've gone down to the smaller containers because you typically never make it through a whole container before you kind of throw it out and freshen it up all over again. We're going to be featuring a lot of these type of spices in some of our upcoming events here on campus. Starting with tomorrow, the 16th, we're having a virtual tea, and one of the teas that are going to be available to you is a spiced tea. We have a hot cocoa bar on the 17th, which is going to be out in the gazebo, weather permitting, and you might want to try to make yours a Mexican hot cocoa. We'll have some cinnamon out there, we'll have some vanilla available. You can add that to your hot cocoa. On the 23rd, we're going to have cookies with a history of Saint Nick, and we'll be using some of these spices in the cookies that we've prepared. And we're having an eggnog day on the 24th, so you're definitely going to taste the nutmeg in the eggnog. I'm going to put together an instant chai tea recipe that you can make up in your house. It's an instant mix, and then all you have to do when you're ready for a cup of hot tea is just add hot water, a little bit of warm milk, and you can have a nice cup of spiced tea. And I just wanted to end by wishing all of you a very happy and healthy holiday, and I am really looking forward to a much brighter new year. Thanks.